I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capitol Views. Jeremy Woodrow, the director of Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, is with us. Jeremy, welcome.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate being here.
ASME is the state's chief fisheries marketing and seafood marketing institute. And Jeremy, could you just tell us a little bit about ASME and some of the changes that have happened in recent times?
Yeah, so ASME is the official seafood marketing arm for the state of Alaska. We're a public-private partnership with the state and the seafood industry. We're fully supported by the seafood industry. We used to get some state funding, but in recent years that's been reduced. And so ASME is funded by the seafood industry through a self-assessment. So they set that amount and that funds ASME. Then we also receive some federal funds to kind of round out our portfolio.
And 2 years ago you had some state funds, but those are no longer in the budget.
Well, correct. Like many state agencies, when our budget realities in the state were really brought forth, like many state agencies, we had to see a reduction. So we made incremental reductions over time. We do have a little bit of a rainy day savings account that we do pull from to keep some of our marketing programs more consistent from year to year, so we're not making huge cuts from one budget year to the next.
Jeremy, when that happened, did you have to phase out any kind of marketing effort?
We have had a relook at how we do our business. We've made some reductions to our international as well as our domestic marketing. A good example is we reduced our advertising spend in the U.S. market by over $2 million. So we used to have a $2 million advertising spend reaching consumers across the United States. That was one of the things that we just had to cut from our budget when we've had to tighten up our funding.
Is there any way you were able to replace that through things like social media?
Well, social media definitely helps from a public relations standpoint. But in terms of sheer numbers, you really get what you pay for. So we've had to be more strategic in where we do place our dollars with partnerships, working with other brands, other agencies in the U.S. and overseas that align with our marketing efforts.
Jeremy, we just learned that you have a new economic assessment. A brand new McDowell Group report on the seafood industry's economic contribution to the state. Do you know some of the results?
Yeah, I would love to highlight that. Every 2 years, ASME teams up with the McDowell Group to do an economic value of the Alaska seafood industry. It's a report that is available now on alaskaseafood.org if you want to dive into it really deep. But some general numbers seafood is a cornerstone of Alaska's economy. We employ over 60,000 workers every year in the state of Alaska. About $5.6 billion in economic output just in the state alone. It really is a driver of our economy for coastal Alaska as well as the whole state.
And the tax contribution to the state and to the communities is pretty substantial also.
It is. The seafood industry contributes a little over $170 million a year to state and local government coffers. What's interesting about that, if we were to increase the value of our fisheries, just the ex-vessel value by just 1 cent per fishery, you could increase that by $1.8 million a year. If you increased the value of every fishery by just 10 cents, that's about $11 million that goes into the revenues for the state and local governments.
So Jeremy, in that context, does seafood pay for itself in terms of its cost of regulation?
I think when we talk about return on investment, seafood definitely pays for itself of what it returns back to the state of Alaska. It's a very mature industry in terms of the different industries here in the state of Alaska. It's been around since statehood, and our fisheries are well managed. They consistently return back to the state of Alaska, and we see that year over year.
And one of the things that's important about seafood is that by our Constitution, we're obligated to manage it for sustainable yield, which means that the Department of Fish and Game has to have the resources to go and actually manage the fisheries to guarantee a sustainable run.
And that's
in case of salmon, at least.
Correct. That's really important, especially from a marketing perspective. That's recognized worldwide that Alaska manages our fisheries, both federal and state, better than really anywhere else in the world. So we're looked at the gold standard of how we manage our fisheries. That's recognized by consumers. It's recognized by seafood customers who want to buy our seafood, and it sets us apart.
So wild Alaska salmon sustainably harvested. That's a good seal.
It's a great tenet to stand on. It resonates with consumers both here in the U.S. and abroad.
Does it make us any more money? I mean, the fact that salmon is from Alaska, does that result in a higher price consumers are willing to pay?
So one thing we do at the Alaska Seafood Market Institute is we do a lot of different consumer studies, and we do know that when you put the name Alaska in front of whether it's salmon or cod or pollock or halibut, consumers are willing to pay more for that fish when Alaska is attached to its name.
That's interesting. Is it mainly the white tablecloth market? The so-called, the
our seafood
restaurants,
actually, we have a seafood for every customer. We're in fast food, we're in quick service, we're in fast casual, we're in white tablecloth, and we're in retailers across the entire world. So there really is a seafood for everyone. It's not just white tablecloth. You can find it in your local McDonald's as well in the fish sandwich.
Yeah. Now, how about canned salmon? Do we still have a pretty good market for old-fashioned canned salmon?
The old-fashioned canned salmon. Canned salmon has actually changed quite a bit. We're seeing a lot more fillet production coming out of Alaska. So cans seeing a reduction. About 13% or so of our product that we do export, from as far as salmon goes, is canned salmon. But that's quite a reduction from what it was in its historic, probably prime.
So and a lot of that goes to England?
A lot of canned salmon still goes to England. They still have a preference for it. It kind of falls back from the World War II days. But consumer preferences have changed. They're looking for more of a fillet. And technology has also changed as well. Freeze technology has changed drastically over the last 30, 40 years. And so consumers are getting a better frozen product than they perhaps used to.
Yeah, one of the things I remember about not being an expert in this industry, one of the things I remember is that canning, it's an old technology, but also it's still important because when you have a huge run, like in Bristol Bay, you have to be able to quickly process that fish and do something with it quickly.
Yes, that's certainly true, and that still holds for our larger salmon species such as sockeye, which can have huge runs in certain years, and same with pink salmon, which can have some large runs years, and so that helps processors hold some of that inventory over and then find markets for it later.
Are we able to keep the processing capacity?
That is a challenge for the seafood processors in Alaska, especially when you have swings from year to year, to maintain the workforce they need to move our seafood from their shoreside plants into markets worldwide. So that will always be a challenge. That's something that the processing sector is trying to become more efficient in recruiting people for, but it's one that still persists.
Well, Jeremy, thank you for joining us. Seafood is a very important industry for Alaska, so thanks for sharing us some of the information.
Thank you for having me here today.
Tim Bradner, thank you for joining us in Capitol Views.